history at the University of Chicago. I butchered some of that because I don't have it in front of me. But he's also a student of knowledge at Darul Qasim, and he's finishing his Mufti degree at Darul Qasim. Inshallah, without further ado, Salih Basir.
As I mentioned earlier, for me as a student of Islamic history, Islam is the most important part of that. And I try to find Quranic verses or ahadith by which I can learn and derive a methodology by which I can approach some of these topics. A hadith that is really striking to me comes in both Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, and if I'm not mistaken, Tirmidhi as well. سَبَعَةٌ يُظِلُّهُمُ اللَّهُ لَا ظِلَّ إِلَّا ظِلَّ عَرْشِهِ أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. And one of those seven, the Holy Prophet, may God cradle him with joy in Medina, said that there are 7 categories of people who will receive shade, saya, on the Day of Judgment, and no one else will receive shade through the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one of the categories is Sultan al-Adil. And this idea of the just king, that he is someone who has adala, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Nahl, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى. Right? إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ. So the amr, the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that regulates, that bandobast intizam dunya ima, that regulates our world is through adl, is through justice. And we have to bring a spiritual justice, we have to bring legal justice, we have to bring internal justice, architectural justice, artistic justice, communal justice. All of these justices are under this category of adl and adala, and obviously perfected in the personality of the gorgeous Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And Aurangzeb is this is actually my first time speaking on Aurangzeb. I've been sort of swimming in many books from this time period, namely Ma'asir Alamgiri, Ruqat Alamgiri, Amal Salih. These are all books from this time period, very much unexplored, and it's so unfortunate that we as Muslims aren't even allowed to have a conversation about our own people without our lives being on the line. Khatre-e-Jan, right? AK, what is it? Neem Hakim Khatre-e-Jan, Neem Mu'arrikh Pur Mu'arrikh Khatre-e-Jan. That you can be a full historian, your life is still in danger, right? You can be a proper historian, your life is still in danger. Yeah, right? And it's for me, there's a lot of beauty and a lot of joy being able to speak about our past, about our historical figures. Especially someone like Aurangzeb, as one of the uncles mentioned before, he ruled for about 54 years. No other Muslim king ruled as long as him in history besides his great-grandfather Akbar. Sultan Sulaiman of Al-Qanuni from the Ottoman Empire was about 4950, so this is the second longest ruling Muslim king in our 1400 saal ki tarikh mein. This is no small feat. I mean, what does it mean to rule an empire across a land as big as Europe for 52 years? Under the raya, under the chanda, and under the saya of Islam, right? Of Maturidi theology, of Hanafi legal and social ethics, right? And so for me to approach this, is a very emotional topic. It's a very moving topic, and I'm so glad that despite 200 years of colonialism, despite 200 years of history erasure by which we were taught to forget our own past, we are sort of deprived of a knowledge of who we are, a knowledge of our language, a knowledge of our ethics. All of that was taken from us, right? People don't even know what their names mean anymore. Before, in Mughal India, every name had people would have 3-4 names, and all of these, as if a person's name was a jumla, it was a sentence of beauty, right? Now, someone opens up the Quran and finds a name, that's fine, and I'm glad that they do that. The Quran has barakah. But there was intentionality, right? This idea of إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ was underscored every dimension of our civilization. And when I look at Aurangzeb's career and life, nobody embodies the ethics of political leadership of the Khulafa al-Rashida other than, I think, Aurangzeb and Sultan Salim Yavuz of the Ottoman Empire. And this is my reading of history. Obviously, I'm Hyderabadi, I'm biased. But in fact, Aurangzeb used to call Hyderabad Darul Jihad because no Mughal king was able to take Hyderabad. Hyderabad but you know, and after he conquered, he called it Farkhunda Shahar, the glittering city on the hill. But let me see. So anyways, so interestingly, Aurangzeb was born about 15 years after Akbar died. Akbar died in 1605. Aurangzeb was born in 1617. So about 12-year gap between Akbar and Aurangzeb. His name was given at his birth, Aurangzeb. Aurangzeb, Zayd means beauty, Aurang means throne. It means the beauty of the throne, right? And so, and also about almost every single Mughal king's name was Muhammad, right? And to even Akbar is Muhammad Jalaluddin Akbar. Jahangir is Muhammad Nuruddin Jahangir. Humayun is Muhammad Nasiruddin Humayun. Shah Jahan is Muhammad Shihabuddin Shah Jahan, right? And so this idea of the love of the Holy Prophet underscores alayhi salatu wasalam, and this is really, really important. And you know, I will try to show you. Sorry, a lot of preliminary remarks. It's very exciting for me to talk about the subject and Samin and Ikram. To start off, we always have to start off with the British. This was the first British quote-unquote academic / historical work that was written in the 1690s on Aurangzeb. So you can see the Old English where the F is actually an S. So the 1690s, it was written about Aurangzeb. So this idea of Aurangzeb is really occupying the imagination of Europe and the British, because you have to remember also, Aurangzeb is the wealthiest human being in his lifetime. Right? Does anybody know the GDP of Mughal India during Aurangzeb's era? So for comparison today, America is about 15-16% of the world's GDP. China is about 12 to 13%. Does anybody know what how much?
1/3.
Huh?
1/3 of the 20.
Close. 25. About 22 to 25%. Obviously, GDP is a modern economic notion. It's anachronistic to project it onto the past. But two Cambridge statisticians did a 30-year study, and so Aurangzeb was the wealthiest human being in his lifetime, and that's something, right? To be a Hanafi Maturidi king and be that wealthy and be so devoted to. I really want to save this line for the end, but I'm just going to share it now. And there's 250 of his letters preserved, and us Indian Muslims should get together and try to read some of them. They're really. I'm going to read some passages because I want people to hear from the pen of Aurangzeb and hear, because we never hear from the kings themselves. It's always people speaking on behalf of them and intermediaries, and the most important thing of history is that we should try to find and excavate the lost voices. And if we can hear from Aurangzeb himself, as Indian Muslims, especially as Dakkani Muslims, we know he gave his life for Islam in the Dakkan, and you know, as Hyderabadi Muslims, that's really meaningful for me. But this is a sort of passage where it begins, right? Because remember, Christianity has already gone through the Lutheran Revolution, right? The split between Catholicism and Protestantism. So this idea of religion and politics is antithetical and almost anathema, right, to European observers. They don't like this idea of religion and politics because of the Catholic Church. So it's baggage that they're projecting onto Islam, and it's still happening today, right? So don't let Protestant baggage ever warp your idea of Islam. And Muhammad Iqbal in Allahabad in 1930, when he gave his speech, the first paragraph was, he told Muslims in the audience in Allahabad in 1930 that we are not Christians, and don't let what Martin Luther did reform or warp your idea of how we understand Islam. Islam is an entire paradigmatic, social, political, and ethical system, and don't let anybody take that away from anyone. So this is his childhood. This is actually a contemporary miniature that I was able to find. On the right, you can see Aurangzeb Shabihe. Shabihe is an Arabic word. In Urdu, it means image or like. Shabihe Aurangzeb Bahadur. So this is him about 14, 15 years old. This is only one painting of this. This was made during his lifetime. And back then you had to stand for 3-4 hours as the, what is it called, the Musawwir, or the Surat Gar would draw your picture, right? And so this is an actual painting of him. As you can see, he's very skinny. He would not remain like that later on, but he's a very skinny boy, right? This is the only picture we have of him through his youth. So we can probably date this as at 16, 17 years old, probably 1638, 1639. His childhood education, at the age of 8 years old, he read with a teacher from Iran, Mullah Hashim Jilani, Ihya Ulumuddin of Imam Ghazali, at the age of 9 years old. Does anybody know how massive that book is? It's about 800 pages. Ihya Ulumuddin. This is a totem of civilization. You can read it in the passage right there. and under the guidance of Danishman Khan. Sorry, Mullah Hashim Jalani was his Arabic and Persian teacher. And think about that. Think about if our kings are reading Ihya Ulumuddin. Ihya Ulumuddin is a Sufi textbook to make you true, and a highly ethical, moral creature and human being. To read this at 9, 10 years old is no small feat. Also, the Arabic is very challenging. You bring Atkal Kilmolvi applying it. I mean, these are my classmates. A lot of them will not be able to read the text. So this kid is no Salki Batchin. He's reading this text. So this is phenomenal, right? And also, there's psychology in that book. There's a lot of content in that book. So this is really, and so much to say. Just really quickly, sorry. There's a book written by a Shi'i historian in the 1880s of Lucknow, Mirza Muhammad Ja'far. He wrote a book called Qadim Lucknow Ki Akhri Bahar. Whoever reads Urdu should read that book. Perhaps we can have a halaqah about it. He talks about Muslim Indian social values. And it's one of the most beautiful books I've ever written. It talks about the adab that we had in our everyday lives amongst each other. And we talk about this word takalluf, but the reality is that our takalluf comes from adab, right? What else does takalluf come from? It's this idea that we have a very high, and I'm not saying all takalluf is good, but we have a very high level of adab, and we can, if your king is reading Ihya Ulumuddin, you can imagine what the ulama and what the average person is doing. I mean, you're the wealthiest person on the face of the planet, and you are reading Sufi texts, right? And nobody's forcing Aurangzeb to be Muslim, right? Who can force Aurangzeb to be Muslim? He's the wealthiest. His army about 600,000 soldiers, right? Cannons that you could not believe. The top, right? The top. He hit his top khan. Top is a Turkish word that means cannon now in Urdu, right? Top se. What's the line in Shikwa? Top se bhi. Teh kya cheezein hum top se bhi lar jate the. What's that line in Shikwa, right? So the top khana of Aurangzeb. All this stuff is so much to say. I want to start off with his first expedition. I didn't mention my previous talk. This is the first Mughal king Babur. He never necessarily wanted to come to India. He was born in Samarkand, or born in Farghana, in a town called Andijan. I went, as I mentioned last year. It's on the border of Kyrgyzstan, China, and Uzbekistan. I took an 18-hour train from Tashkent just to find his hometown, Babur's hometown, on the border of Kyrgyzstan. And Babur lost Samarkand 3 times, then he came to India. Shah Jahan being so incredibly wealthy, right? And you also have to ask a question. What kind of civilization produces something like Taj Mahal? What kind of that amount of people still go to India today, not for any Hindu architecture, right? They come for the Taj Mahal, they can't escape that. So what do? They just say it's a Hindu temple. What kind of civilization, to create that level of beauty? What does the Holy Prophet ﷺ say? Inna Allah jamilun yuhibbul jamal. Allah himself is beauty, right? And to create beauty in everybody's life, isn't that why the Holy Prophet was sent to us? What's the ayah in the Quran? Taha ma anzalna alayka al-Quran litashqa. The Quran has not been revealed so that you are unhappy or you are miserable. Litashqa yani badbakht, taaki aap badbakht ho jaye. The Quran is not for that, it's to give you joy. Right? So to create joy and beauty in our life and in our civilization. Anyways, Aurangzeb was sent because his older brother, by the way, there were 4 brothers. I should mention this because this is going to become important later on. The oldest brother is Dara Shikoh. Second oldest brother is Murad Bakhsh. Third oldest brother is Aurangzeb, and 4th brother is Shah Shuja. Okay? So Dara Shikoh, Murad Bakhsh, Aurangzeb, and Shah Shuja. There are 2 sisters, Jahanara and Roshanara. Okay? So there's 6 siblings. Whose mother is, who are all of their mothers? Mumtaz Mahal. What's up?
No, it's like Mumtaz.
Mumtaz Mahal, right? Who's obviously buried in the Taj Mahal. So Aurangzeb's mother is in the. So we have 2 very different forms of beauty. One is political and religious beauty, and one is architectural beauty, right? And this idea as Muslims that we should be able to create and cultivate beauty in every sphere and dimension of life, right? People always talk about akhlaq as just, Rozana Muamalat. Akhlaq is so much more than how we treat people. And I know people talk about, and that's important too, but akhlaq needs to be in architecture. Akhlaq needs to be in intellectual thought, in social thought, in political thought. Akhlaq needs to be everywhere, right? Shah Jahan, in a letter to Aurangzeb, we have the letter, he says, Zamini Maruthi, inherited lands. He says, i.e. ancestral lands, I am sending you to go and retake Samarkand. So Aurangzeb is about 22 years old, his first expedition. Dara Shikoh was never sent necessarily an expedition except for one to Kandahar in the 1650s. 1640s, and Aurangzeb goes from Delhi to Amritsar, and then to Lahore, and then to Peshawar, and then to Kabul. Now he has to go now he faces the Uzbek army in Balkh. This is Balkh in the 1840s. Okay, so this fortress was built by the Mughals, and it's still pretty much there today, although obviously a lot of violence in Afghanistan, most of it has been destroyed. But this is what probably would have looked like when Aurangzeb walked to this castle in the 1640s as a 22-year-old prince, and he came in and he faced off with the Uzbek king, Abdullah Khan or something like that. And in that battle, we have both from Mughal texts and from Uzbek texts about how in the middle of battle, Aurangzeb got off from his hawda. Hawda, does anyone know what a hawda is? It's on an elephant. You have the carriage. It's like a carriage on top of an elephant. Hawdaj in Arabic, we call it hawdaj. And he got off, and he prayed Dhuhr with Jama'ah. And I remember being so shocked because when I was in my madrasa, we memorized the Shikwa of Iqbal, and we all remember that line, right? A gaya aini laraye mein agar waqt namaz to qibla ruh ho ke zameen bos hue qawm hijaz ek hi saf mein khade ho gaye mahmood ayaz na koi banda raha na koi banda nawaz. Right? That line, I realized that Iqbal took from Aurangzeb. And for me, it was really beautiful because it just showed how well read Iqbal was, and Iqbal read everything. We can even read 5% of what Iqbal read, right? Today, Ajkal. And Iqbal took that from that passage. Anyways, Aurangzeb wins the war, and they come to a treaty, and he says that, look, you're not going to be able to take Samarkand and keep Bukhara because it's on the Oxus River, so just go back home and we'll offer you sovereignty. Anyways, Aurangzeb goes back home, and Aurangzeb goes back home, Shah Jahan falls into illness, and the War of Succession starts. And this is really important because the British and the Hindus could never understood what Mughal political theory is. It is based off a Taimuri system. Taimur is their ancestor, where every prince has equal right to the throne. And to ensure a fair competition, or to ensure that the best person becomes the ruler, it was essentially all-out warfare. Now, some kings, like Babur and Shah Jahan, tried to evade the system, right? So you can think about it in the sense of like, if there's a political order, let's say if succession in Christianity is primogeniture, where the eldest son took over, with the Mughals, from the very beginning, they were like, the eldest son doesn't mean anything. So when I die, you have to take power, and by you taking power will be a demonstration of your political and military skill, right? And obviously, we can disagree with it. The fact that brothers are going to war with each other. Remember, these are not half brothers; these are full siblings. It's not a great thing to read about as a modern human being. Mulana Shibli Nu'mani has a book. I'm going to talk a little bit about that at the end. He was the first person to write a critical Muslim appraisal of Aurangzeb in the 1880s in Nadwa, and I believe Nadwa is in Lucknow, somewhere near there. And it was political theory at that time. And the historical position is that we should not judge something that happened, political theory that me and you have never lived in that world, right? We can only read it in text. We should not judge a world that me and you are not a part of. My grandparents, I'm sure, have said problematic things, right? Does that mean that we should cancel them? I mean, just your grandparents, I'm sure we can think of that, right? Right? Does that mean we should cancel them? Now imagine 500 years, 400 years ago. I mean, just 20 years, how the world has changed. Right? 20 years ago, most of us would probably be canceled in this room, right? But does that mean that now 400 years before that, there's a lot more to be said here. Anyways, they all get letters of Shah Jahan's Marazul Maut, or his final illness. Aurangzeb is a governor in the Deccan, near Bijapur. He rides north. Dara Shikoh was never left out of the capital, and the reason was Shah Jahan wanted him to be the successor, and Shah Jahan wanted to end the Taimuri system. It's very clear that Shah Jahan did not, and neither did Babur. Babur and Shah Jahan specifically both did not like the Taimuri system, but the reality is that the Mughal Empire, as much as the British and the Hindus want to make it seem, it wasn't a dictatorship, right? It was built of nobles. You had the Sipahi Salar, the leading generals. You had the Mansabdars. You had the Jagirdars. You had the Zamindars. You had the Tahsildars. You had the Ta'alluqdars. You had the Faujdars. You have to navigate all of these different and various relationships. And all of these people have various loyalties, right? And so then it becomes that if you do appoint a successor, Why does General care if that becomes a successor? And it seems that most of the nobles wanted Aurangzeb to become king, especially the Hindu Rajputs, because they valued military valor, and the reality was that Dara Shikoh was not a good military general. And so the first people to support Aurangzeb, after his own Iranian generals, were the Rajput Hindus, Raja Jai Singh and Raja Jaswant Singh, right? And from what I read of the BJP, they just called them traitors to Hinduism, right? Because anything that's not convenient to them is just traitors. They're not pro-Hinduism, etc., etc., etc. Anyways, this is actually a miniature of the battle of I'm forgetting the Chitral or Chausi. I don't know if it was the battle in 1656. Aurangzeb meets Dara Shikoh in battle, about 100 miles outside of Delhi, south of Delhi, and Aurangzeb wins. Right? He was a much more brilliant military general. He was about 35, 38 years old, and he destroys Dara Shikoh's army, and Dara Shikoh flees now. Right? Dara Shikoh flees up north into Delhi. He says salam to Shah Jahan, and then he goes up north towards Kashmir. And then from Kashmir, he comes down into Lahore, and then he stops there, and Aurangzeb, he has a brief coronation ceremony. Right here. This is Aurangzeb's coronation ceremony. So that's Aurangzeb, that's his two sons, Bahadur Shah Awal and Muhammad Azam Shah. That's his major sword. We have the sword, by the way, in the British Library, in the British Museum in London. And he crowns himself king very briefly for about 2 days, and then he leaves and he goes to Lahore to find his brother. His brother flees, goes into Multan. Dara Shikoh Aurangzeb has now reached Lahore, and obviously the optics of a younger brother trying to chase his older brother is not great, but I'm going to be honest with you. That's what happened. Doesn't make sense to hide it, right? That is what happened. You had one Hanafi brother chasing another brother to basically kill him, right? And this was Taimuri political theory. You can take from it what you want. Obviously, Allahu a'lamu bi ahwalikum, lahum ma kasabu wa lakum ma kasabtum. They will get what they earn in the afterlife, and you will get what you earn in the afterlife. And also, just because someone does something, especially a king, right? Politics is a dirty place. If someone does something that you don't like, does that mean that everything else is worthless and shouldn't be acknowledged or recognized? Imagine if someone did that to us. How many problematic things do we do? It's something to understand, right? And that if anything, it just shows me how ethical the Sahaba were. It shows me that truly the Sahaba, Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar, Sayyidina Uthman, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhum, were truly at the peak of character, the peak of excellence, and the fact that Aurangzeb did many, many great things. One thing I will say between us Indian Muslims, he had an incredible temper, that I think hurt him, and especially vis-a-vis Shivaji. And there's many stories to say there. He had, I don't know if he got to that part in Ihya Ulumuddin, but he definitely could have handled that better. He did not tolerate adabi or disrespect. As we say, ba adab ba nasib, be adab be nasib, and bad adab bad nasib. He took that very, very seriously. Nasib almost to him was their life. But anyways, Aurangzeb catches him again in Rajasthan, because remember, this is before borders. So Dara Shikoh flees from Multan south into Rajasthan, and he took refuge with an Afghan zamindar whom Dara Shikoh had done sifarish for on behalf of him to save his life, and the Afghan prince sold him out and gave him to Aurangzeb. And Aurangzeb, again, to be brutally honest, Aurangzeb had Dara Shikoh, and also you have to remember that Dara Shikoh was deeply engaging with Hindu pundits and yogis. We have his Sirr-e-Akbar, we have his translation of some of these earlier Hindu texts. He was studying with them. Aurangzeb had a qadi rule him as a kafir. Now, as a Hanafi Maulana, I have read Dara Shikoh's texts. I believe that fatwa was not warranted. But I'm not going to relitigate a fatwa from 500 years ago. He was definitely into mysticism, but my understanding was that Dara Shikoh definitely died a Muslim from the text that I have read, especially Sadr Akbar's later texts. And there's no reason why the fatwa of kufr should have been applied on him. And, so that's, I believe the Qadi was Qadi Abdul Wahab from Gujarat. So Aurangzeb has Dara Shikoh into the city of Delhi, facing backwards on a donkey, with a bag over his face and his son's face, Suleiman Shikoh, right into Delhi. And then a couple days later, Aurangzeb doesn't kill him. It seems like Aurangzeb had ordered him to be killed, but regardless, Dara Shikoh dies under Aurangzeb's Sarparastin Nigrani, his older brother. And that is the truth, there's no escaping from it. It's only the Holy Prophet is perfect. Alayhi salatu wassalam. So I wanted to just touch on his military conquests. Now, what's really interesting is that Aurangzeb could have done one of two things, or three things, or four things rather. First is he could have gone from Assam into China. And remember, China had never been touched by Muslims. Timur had gone to conquer China, but he died on the way in modern-day Russia. So he could have gone through Cambodia, Vietnam into China. Or he could have gone from Kandahar into Iran and conquered Iran. Or he could have gone through Samarkand and Bukhara and tried to take Russia. Or he could have conquered the Deccan. He had one of four choices, and it seems like he was weighing these choices, especially after he went to modern-day Burma, right? And I think for him, he did believe that he was sort of obligated to complete the conquest of the Deccan. India, by the way, had never been united under one king until Aurangzeb's time, right? It had not under Ashoka, not under the Mauryan Empire, not under the Gupta Empire, not under any of the previous Turkic kings. The first time India is ever united as one land was under Aurangzeb. This is the second time is the British. And modern state of India today is not the full India, right? It's obviously split. So it's only under Aurangzeb and the British is India really ever united as a land, which is wild to think about, right? That the first time India is united under a Sunni Hanafi king. Akbar had started. Akbar, Jahangir, and Shah Jahan had all spent lakhs of rupees. And remember, 1 rupee back then, and legal professor did an estimate, could buy you about 40 bushels of grain, 1 silver rupee. That's how much the value of 1 rupee. It's purchasing power back then. So a lakh of rupee, you can only estimate how much value that is today if you convert that, right? So Aurangzeb does decide on the Deccan, and we have letters. I read through the letters between him and his father. Shah Jahan at some point had just given up on conquering the Deccan, and Aurangzeb was like, listen, there were other Muslim kingdoms ruling in the Deccan, the Nizam Shahis, Ahmadnagar, Bijapur, etc. Aurangzeb was like, listen, they're weak. We can bring all of them under our empire. It'll increase our revenue. Plus, they are not really spreading Islam properly. And that is something that Aurangzeb tells his father. He's like, these are people who are not taking care, their khilafah or their amana as rulers, they're not fulfilling it, right? Especially the Golconda king, really, really problematic stuff that he was up to. Not gonna go into that now. But in 1682, he leaves Delhi, Paytakht Darul Khilafah Delhi, and he never comes back. He leaves in 1681, and he dies in which year? 1707. So for about 26 years, he never spent a single night he never spent 2 nights in one place. And this is the idea of the mobility of Muslim kings. This idea that you're always harakat me barakat, right? Al-barakah fil haraka, right? This idea of Muslims that when you're on the move, Allah gives you barakah, Allah gives you success. This idea that you're constantly moving. And you look at the sunnah of the Sahaba, most of the Sahaba left Medina. Is that not true? Yeah. Most of the Sahaba left Medina. I believe the only when you go to Baqi', there's only 3 or 4 major Sahaba. Right? Sayyidina Abdurrahman ibn Auf, Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar, etc., etc. Most of the Sahaba left Medina. They were moving, right? Constantly moving, and that mobility is really important, especially when we talk about Islamic political theory. He sets his sights on conquering the Deccan. And if you look really quickly, obviously we all know the story of Shivaji, who was the Hindu Maratha king. He was not Brahmin, although he had a Hindu Brahmin priest raise his caste Brahmin did not know that you could do that, but that he did that just to sort of present himself as a Brahmin ruler. Interestingly, Aurangzeb's major general, Raja Jaswant Singh, Raja of Jaipur, Hindu king, defeats Shivaji in battle, brings Shivaji to the court of Aurangzeb to integrate him as a Mansabdar. And Shivaji comes to the Mughal court in the 1670s, right? This is documented both in Mughal and Marathi sources. Shivaji comes to court. Shivaji knew fluent Farsi, right? You had to know fluent Farsi if you wanted to communicate with these Mughal leaders. Shivaji knows Farsi. Unfortunately, something happens. I don't want to get into too much detail. Shivaji disrespects Aurangzeb in the Darbar. So you had the Divan-e Khas, Divan-e Am. Let's say you had the Takht-e-Taus, the peacock throne here. Aurangzeb would sit here. You would have the line of the highest ranked Mansabdars here, the other line here. The second row would be the lower ranked, etc. You have muftis, qadis, artisans, etc. Shivaji was given a much lower rank than many of the other Hindu generals, and Shivaji became very furious by that, and he started shouting in court, and he disrespected Aurangzeb in that moment. Anyways, Shivaji flees, and he goes back to thing. And this is, one of the moments that Aurangzeb was not a perfect man. And I truly feel that had he been able to keep in control of his emotions at that moment, the Marathas might have ended there, because that was the Mughal policy. You conquer a kingdom, and then you integrate them in your polity. And that's what they always did with the Rajputs, with the Balochis, with the Sindhis, with the Kashmiris, with the Bengalis, with the Assamese, with the Dakkanis. You just integrate them, right? You just keep integrating. There's no need to keep conquering, etc., etc., etc. So he moves court to Ahmednagar. So Ahmednagar becomes a new capital, right? And he never goes back home. And there are many letters. In fact, when he conquers Madras in 1691, his Sipahi Salar writes a letter to him and says that you have conquered. Yeah, he said that he went all the way up to here, and he said, and the Zulfiqar Khan, who was Iranian, said that, listen, Aurangzeb, you have conquered all of India. Go back home, go rest. You know what Aurangzeb said? He says, I'll rest when I die. Qabr rahat ke liye. You rest when you die. That's your zindagi is for amal, right? You to constantly do work. This idea of but obviously this is a society that is not capitalist. People are living good lives. There's a metaphysical belief in the afterlife. Today, you obviously just can't copy paste that today. And I would not encourage someone to do that. Anyways, by 1685, all of this is conquered. Just the southern peninsula tip was not conquered. All of this is conquered, but the issue is that Shivaji's son Sambhaji comes up, and for the next 25 years, Aurangzeb is putting down rebellions. And what he would do is, mind you, this is from the age of 60 to 90. 60 to 90. Nice. Leading a 500,000 army. And I remember reading about his conquest of Hyderabad, as I said to Darul Jihad. He sent his son Bahadur Shah Awal to besiege the fort. Hyderabad is a very well-guarded city. We have the Golconda fort. It was a very impregnable fort. And Bahadur Shah fails, so Aurangzeb comes himself, right, to conquer the fort. And after he conquers the fort, I'm not sure how much after, but one of the du'as that he mentions is so beautiful. And we have it in his letters. He says, Allahumma bihurmati Muhammad wa ali Muhammad nabbihna min al-qawmi al-ghafirin. Oh Allah, by the sanctity of the Prophet, and oh Allah, by the hurma, the sanctity, these are his exact words. Allahumma I believe the dua that he himself created. Allahumma bihurmati Muhammad wa ali Muhammad nabbihna min al-qawmi al-ghafirin. Wake us up from being asleep. And this is the wealthiest man in the world, right? And to think about that, as a Muslim, right, you should aspire to create a world where people want to imitate you, right? Where you can define who you are, define your own values, that you are not subjected or muqallid to other people's systems or paradigms, that you can create and be creative, right? And you can offer something that is beautiful and that is joyful to the rest of the world. Anyways, so for the next about 27 years, Aurangzeb, by the way, the distance between this here and here is like the difference between Paris and not southern Spain, probably northern Spain. And he would keep moving, and you have to feed an army of 600,000 people. What does it mean to feed an army of that size? Right? Also, Deccan has the monsoon season, right? So you can't keep moving. And this idea of of Muslim military and political brilliance, right? And he could have easily decided to say that, no, I'm going to go back home. But this idea that for the first time that all of Hindustan was going to come under the rule of Musalman for the first time in history was something that was really important to him, right? And now how many Muslims are there in the Deccan? About 100 million? Somewhere around that? May all their hasanat go to Aurangzeb, right? And when you read the hadith of the Holy Prophet, the 7 categories I mentioned in the beginning, رَجُلَانِ تَحَبَّا فِي اللَّهِ, etc., etc., Sultanun Adil, this idea of a just king, right? Because that impact of one good political leader can have on centuries. I mean, me as a Hyderabadi Muslim, 330 years after Aurangzeb, I know for a fact, my ancestors are not Iranian or Arab, we are most likely Hindu converts who converted during Aurangzeb's era. I have no shame in saying that, and I'm grateful. Because what else is more important in this world than the oneness of God? And may we always be grateful to those people who led us to that, who were deep factors in am I out of time or okay? I wanted to just spend some time about sort of Mughal administration because it's not talked about enough. So you had the Sultan here. You had the Qadi al-Qudat. These are weird English translations, don't pay attention. Qadi al-Qudat is the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court Justice. You had Divani Aris, who was the Defense Minister. Divani Insha, i.e. Foreign Affairs. Sadr al-Sudur, this is the Grand Mufti. Right? So this idea of the Mufti as someone who is an Islamic legal philosopher, Islamic legal theorist, who's coming up with ideas so the state can rule, right? Because ruling 18th century Spain, this is 100% Catholic, 100% white, everybody speaking Spanish is not that hard. Ruling India with 200 ethnicities and 200 religions and 15 different religions, can you imagine that? I mean, America has still not been able to solve their minority problem, right? So think about what you have to do, and that Islam is allowing this, right? So don't ever let people say that only secularism can provide for peace. No. In Islam, universal system can provide for minority rights, can provide for people to live equitably, to live equally, right? And that's important for people to understand, and we did that for 1,200 years, right? I don't know of any other religious tradition that has done that. This is an actual farman of Aurangzeb. So he would have had a munshi who wrote it. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Okay, so this is preserved for 350 years. This is a document that he would have seen with his own eyes. So first you have his seal here, which is Sultan Aurangzeb, Alamgir, Badshah, Ghazi, Bahadur. You have this thing, this is about dakus, or how would you translate dakus? Not rebels, bandits. Bandits who were pillaging parts of northern India. So he sent a farman to a zamindar, because the zamindars and the faujdars were supposed to handle the bandits. So you have to actively run a state, right? There are things always happening. I mean, there's about 200 million people in India at this time, right? And first of all, look how beautiful this document is. I mean, after 350 years. This is Indian Farsi, not Iranian Farsi. This is the language that we had created, and this is one of thousands, right? Because every day they're writing documents and documents and documents to manage an empire from Kandahar to Burma, to Hyderabad, to Madras, to Bangalore, etc., etc. Every city has tens of thousands of needs, right? Politically, economically, socially, right? You have to, as Allah teaches us in the Quran, لإلافهم قريش إلافي رحلة الشتاء والصيف فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت الذي أطعمهم من جوع وآمنهم من خوف. These two things that Allah mentions in the Quran, that protection from hunger and protection from political insecurity. Just providing for those two things takes so much state effort. And to provide for that for an empire as vast as that, I mean, you can imagine how much work you have to do. And every day you're conquering a new fort, And you're paying muftis to create political theory to rule for this. This is where my interest is, by the way. I focus on Mughal Qadis and how they ruled this empire. Because for my reading, the Hindu had the choice to go to the Pandit, the Sikh had the choice to go to the Guru, the Jew had the choice to go to the Rabbi. they always came to the Hanafi Qadi. Because if you're a Hindu Brahmin and you're a girl, your older brother gets everything. You come to a Hanafi Qadi, you get half the land. Why wouldn't you come to a Hanafi Qadi, right? And we have, in fact, most of our legal documents are about Hindus who are coming to Hanafi Qadis to arbitrate. So this idea, again, of Islam being able to, really regulate and manage in the world. This is a book. This is the first book by Mawlana Shibli Nu'mani. I just wanted to really touch base on his analysis at the end of the book. Where is it? Right? So he's responding to British historians who are really villainizing Aurangzeb. So he says, "तासुब और अदावत का रंग भरा गया है, लेकिन ये कहना भी बिल्कुल मुबालगा है कि वो इंसानी कमजोर से पाक था." Right? And this is important. He was not free from insani kamzor. He was a human being. He was not a prophet. He was not a sahabi. We can say that. There should be nothing wrong. He was not a perfect human being, but he did tremendous good, and he was militarily and Islamically brilliant. बावजूद इन तमाम खूबियों की जो इसमें थी, तैमूरी सलातीन के फहरसत में वही दर्जा उसको दे सकते हैं जो उसको मुरत्तब और तरतीब शुमार की रूह से हासिल था. This is important. ताहम आलम इस्लामी आम इस्लामी दुनिया में उसके बाद आज तक कोई उसके बराबर का शख्स भी नहीं पैदा हुआ. He wrote this in 1890. This is incredible, right? This is someone who is reading all of the British histories and saying this, and this is important, right? And again, आज तक उसके बराबर का शख्स भी नहीं पैदा हुआ, and that's truly something, right? And we are proud of that, and there's nothing wrong, and let no one take that pride away from you, right? These are letters of Aurangzeb's hands. We probably don't have time. This is a schedule that he wrote about Shah Jahan's life, about how he used to wake up before Fajr and he would spend his day in political, social. This is in Farsi. Where does it start? الدنيا مزرعة الآخرة واقع شده خود بدولت بنفسه چهارگری آخر شب از خود بگاه برآمده به اینشان توفیق. This is by Abshar. Abshar was the place where you took a shower in Mughal India. توفیق وضو کرده و به اوراد وظائف می پرداختند. He would start doing dua. This is about Shah Jahan. This is incredible. This is an incredible thing that Aurangzeb was reflecting on his father, and it's really beautiful. I think I have like 3 minutes left, so don't have time to read it, but we should do a part 2. This is a letter. I'm just going to read it as a last thing to do so that we can end with his own words. He wrote it with his own hand, so I'm going to read it to you and translate. Farzand Alija, i.e. exalted son. Likely it was Kam Bakhsh or Muhammad Azam Shah. He also had 4 sons. Dar Ahmedabad in Gujarat. Mir Arabe Darvish Dida and Al-Batta. Mir Arab was the Sufi who had come from Iraq into India. I guess there was some communication. I'm not exactly sure who it is. Dida and he was seen Al-Batta. Baz Akbarabad Ravand. وسلام این شرمنده عقبا و طالب دنیا ابلاغ نماینده. این شرمنده, i.e. himself, give my salams to the Sufi. سلام این شرمنده و خیر عواقب امور و سلامت ایمان از دل و جان مسئلت کنند. Look, this is how Aurangzeb is asking for dua. و خیر عواقب, let him make dua for a good afterlife. عواقب, like عاقبة. امور سلامت ایمان, and the peace of Iman. Let him make dua for my peace of Iman. As dil o jan, from heart and soul. Mas'alat kunan. Mas'ala, to ask, literally beg from the Sufi. Mas'alat kunan. Wa baguyan, ke nazdike ba'ajal. Wa dardi as husni amal umra'in ghafil guzasht. That this person's life is only, Aurangzeb is talking about himself, is only spent in grief and in sin and in ghafla. He's talking about himself after conquering all of India. Right? وَدَرَدِي as husni amal umre in ghafil. That says guzasht. وَقُدْرِي ke manda neez la hasil mi ravad. وَقِدْمِ hayat pish mi ravad. وَفِكْرِ najat pasna. وَآنچه ما کردیم بر خود هیچ در میان خانگان کردیم صاحب خانه را. This is, he's giving illustrative also to his son. But that's something, you know, I don't know if I had anything. Oh, sorry, this is his last letter that he ever wrote to his son Gam Bakhsh a year before he died. I might get emotional reading it, but it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever read in literature, written in 1706. Sorry, I'm going to read this and I'm going to end, if that's okay. This is letter 125 from Ruqat Alamgiri. لیکن نظر به عالم ظاهر و فرزندان هم ضرور که خلق الله و مسلمین ناحق کشته نشود. This is a wasiyah to his son that let you never kill any Muslims or spill any Muslim blood. ناحق کشته نشود. Let you never kill Muslim blood. Let you never spill Muslim blood. فرزند بهادر. His son Bahadur Shah. فرزند obviously means son. وداع آخر. My last farewell. این بگویم. وقت رخصت ندیدم اشتیاقی باقی مانده بیگم بظاهر اگرچه ملول است لیکن مالک دلها خداست. Watch how you treat people because مالک دلها خداست. The owner of all hearts is God. مالک دلها خداست. کوتاه اندیشی موشدهای جز نکامی ثمره ندارند. And he says that I have spent my whole life in worry and anxiety and I have not seen it samara nadaran bear any fruit. Al-wida, al-wida, al-wida. Farewell, farewell, farewell. And he died within 6 months. Jazakallah khair.